Welcome to Growth Beyond Boundaries, the podcast by the Ad Astra Coach Alliance that explores the transformative power of coaching, leadership, and innovation. I'm your host, Andy Huckabee, and I'm so excited to have you join us for our very first episode under a new name. Here at the Ad Astra Coach Alliance, we believe that growth isn't just a goal, it's a journey. Whether you're a leader striving to inspire your team, a professional seeking your next breakthrough, or an organization ready to transform your culture, this podcast is for you. Each segment, we bring you stories, strategies, and insights from our team of seasoned coaches and leaders across industries. Together, we'll discover innovative approaches to fostering a culture built on success, accountability, and collaboration, rooted in both challenging and compassionate coaching practices. So, if you're ready to go beyond boundaries and discover what's possible, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving into a remarkable journey of growth and excellence. Our guest is Teresa Schwab, a highly accomplished coach who has earned the Master Certified Coach credential, commonly known as MCC. With over 59,000 International Coaching Federation certified coaches worldwide, only about 4% have achieved this prestigious distinction. Earning an MCC requires not only mastery of the ICF core competencies and adherence to the ICF Code of Ethics, but also an extraordinary level of commitment and expertise. To qualify, coaches must complete more than 200 hours of coaching education, log over 2,500 hours of coaching experience, and undergo 10 hours of mentoring with an eligible mentor coach. They must also hold or have previously held a PCC credential. Beyond eligibility, MCC coaches demonstrate mastery through a rigorous performance evaluation and the ICF credentialing exam. Maintaining this status requires ongoing professional development, reflecting their dedication to continuous growth and service to their clients. In this episode, Teresa will share her incredible journey to becoming an MCC, what it took, the challenges she faced, and the invaluable lessons she's learned. Whether you're an aspiring coach or simply curious about what it takes to reach the highest levels of coaching excellence, this conversation is sure to inspire and empower you. I welcome Teresa Schwab and Phyllis Collins to the podcast today. Teresa, we want to start by asking you to tell us about your earliest experiences in coaching and what first drew you to the profession.
My whole life, from the time I was probably in third grade, remember thinking I wanted to be a therapist. So I went that direction. Really, again, kind of my whole life sort of set myself up to move in that direction of doing therapy. And in a couple of years into my marriage, I was out delivering flyers for a nonprofit I was working on, and there happened to be a sign in the health department where I was delivering flyers about the Peace Corps. So my husband and I ended up selling everything we owned and joined the Peace Corps for 2 years. And I tell that story because everything shifted in that period of time. When we went overseas, we served in the Peace Corps, and then everything kind of shifted in my world. And I didn't know exactly what that meant, but I came back to the United States and went to graduate school in social work, still sort of willing myself in the direction of therapy, but through a lot of different events, discovered that that wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I ended up really doing macro practice. And through that macro practice, which is really about policy and systems change, I did a lot of lobbying and work at the legislature. Through that process, I was working in a leadership development program at the time, and we sent everyone in our leadership development program to the Center for Creative Leadership in Colorado Springs. And as part of that program, we worked with a coach. It was the first time I had ever heard of coaching. It was the first experience I ever had with the profession. And I was sitting in my coach's office having a conversation with her, and I literally like had this experience where it felt like the clouds parted and the sun shone down. And I literally in that moment went, this is what I was meant to do. And that was my first and best experience with coaching. She was a brilliant coach. And there were so many overlaps to what I wanted in therapy, but all the things that I didn't want in doing therapy. And we can
Yeah.
talk more about those as we go along. But really it was that moment. And at the time I had really small children. So becoming a coach at that moment in my life was not possible. But I kept holding that in the back of my mind. I reached out to her later, asked her how she became a coach, and she was really the first person that introduced me to the International Coaching Federation, and that's really where the journey began. So it was meant to be.
So what year was that when you first had that exposure?
Oh gosh. Let me think about this for a second. It would have been 2005, I think. It would have been in somewhere in
Sure.
that territory of 2005.
So talk more about your journey. You had this initial exposure in 2005 timeframe. You said the skies open up, the clouds parted. I love the metaphor there. What happened next?
So I went back to my job, kept doing the work that I was doing, and at the time loved it. I absolutely loved what I was doing. I was so blessed to be part of an amazing group of people doing really important work. I was working for a statewide oral health coalition at the time, and we were working to increase access to dental care services for underserved populations. I had a fabulous board. I had amazing mentors. And this thing sort of sat in the back of my mind of someday this is what I'm going to do. We had the benefit of really working with some really great consultants who were leadership development consultants. We brought in folks like David Crislip. We talked with lots of folks around collaboration, and there was just so much generous learning going on at the time. And with those partnerships, being able to see there's a path not only to do coaching, but to do coaching as an external consultant. So I had these really great models and people that I could turn to that really showed me that it was possible not to work inside an organization, that it was really possible to go out on your own and actually make that work. So I think both of those things together really set a good foundation for the work that I was doing. And then, I kind of sort of held this idea for a long time until my kids got a little bit older. And 2008, if you remember back to 2008, the economy just went, tanked at the time.
Right.
And um, I was working for a philanthropy at the time, and everything was just really dicey at that moment. So again, I'm sort of holding this in the back of my mind, and there's this sort of really untenable situation going on in the philanthropy world, and it just kept in the back of my mind saying, all right, this, I think the timing is right. The kids are old enough to take care of themselves. They were in school at the time. And that's the moment where I really, actually, the intersection of that was when the Kansas Leadership Center was being formed and starting to create their faculty and coach teams and started training coaches. And because of all of those relationships that I had already had, just had this really fortunate intersection of opportunity and desire, and it all came together at the right time. And that would have been around 2010 when I started
Right.
coach training. So it was
So
just
that's
yeah,
yeah, that's when the three of us met, right?
yeah.
I joined you guys, I think, a little bit later after you all had gone through the training school. So tell us about that, Teresa.
It was fabulous. It was, that period of time, number one, again, fabulous colleagues and just really great people doing meaningful work, being around people who really care about what they are doing and about developing people and about creating leaders who are working for the common good. It all really just resonated with me in terms of who I am and my sort of value around social justice. So all of it was just, it just felt really normal and natural. And coaching is hard. You know, as you all know, it is a different skill set. In some ways, coaching is about letting go of everything you know to be true about how to have conversations and about how to develop people and really leaning into something that is very, very different. And it was hard. Training in that way was hard because we're so used to and accustomed to solving problems. We're so used to sitting down with other people, them bringing us a challenge and us helping them by giving them advice or telling them what to do or sharing our experience. And really having to unlearn all of that to really trust that the other person is the expert in their life and their work, and that my expertise is not in the content of their work or their life, but my expertise is more in the process of helping them get from where they are to where they want to be. There was a lot of unlearning that had to happen. And to show up in that way is extremely different and extremely difficult. And until you do it, it's hard to explain why it's difficult.
Yeah.
To really just let go of being, of advice giving and being an expert. It's a tough skill set to learn. So there was a lot of like leaning in, getting feedback, struggling to not give advice, continuing to get feedback and continuing to unlearn that process, which, by the way, overall, probably took me a good 5 or 6 years to really completely let go of that need to fix and give advice.
You're really talking about the intersection or the decision, advice giving, which essentially is consulting, and
Mm-hmm.
coaching, which is different than that. It's letting go of that and being more of a partner, right? What motivated you to take the coach path as opposed to what your inclination was to give advice and to answer questions and solve problems?
Yeah. I think it's a couple of things. Number one, I love the experience of being challenged. So leaning in, being uncomfortable, challenging myself, trusting a process is extremely gratifying to me. Just that process of unlearning, relearning, being uncomfortable. I love that experience. So I was willing to stay in it. And if you look at the experience on the other side of letting go, I think there's two things that really happen. Number one, the data bears out over and over and over again that people don't learn best when people tell them what to do. They learn best when they find their own solutions. Because I can tell you what to do, but if it doesn't match your personality, it doesn't match your skill set, it doesn't match your strengths, you're not going to go do it. I can give you the best advice in the world that worked for me. But when you walk out of that conversation and you go, yeah, that's really good advice, but that will never work, and you never implement it, we've both wasted our time. So the data is convincing that when people do their own thinking, they think critically, they come up with solutions that fit their personality, their style, their strengths, they're going to be much more engaged in following through and doing the thing that they said they wanted to do. The data shows that very clearly. And then once you have that experience where you let go, you lean in, and you see people's faces light up, and they have moments of clarity where they're like, oh, I've never looked at it that way. I've never seen the situation from this lens before. I can't believe I never thought about that before. Now that I've looked at this situation in a very different way, I can see all kinds of solutions and possibilities and experiments and things that I can do that I couldn't see before. And when you have that experience of somebody having that clarity for themselves, you finally just like in your bones, you can finally start to understand the power of this. So those two things, sort of head and heart and gut, sort of all combined with the data and then the experience, you can really start to lean in and go, yeah, this is really powerful territory that we're in here.
Teresa, I'm curious. You'd gone through your training, and as we all know, that there's a difference even in getting the training and then still using the training, because the training is great for just having coaching skills. You had already had one professional certification. When did you decide, or how did you make that transition into obtaining your first coaching certification?
Well, funny enough, I, the moment I entered coach training and the moment that I knew there were credentials, I made the decision I was going to get an MCC someday. That was never in question. It was from the moment that I started coach training and learned that there were credentials that I was on that path. So ACC was just a natural progression of that, and PCC was a natural progression of that, and MCC was always the goal. There was never a moment where MCC was not the goal. And it probably tells you a little bit about my personality. I think people experience me as somebody who's pretty calm, who's pretty laid back, maybe a little bit non-competitive externally, but internally that is not at all who I am. I have been called many times by family members words like bulldog, badger. There have been words that people have called me before, and once I set a goal, it's going to happen. So MCC was always the path. There was never a moment where I questioned that. So ACC was just really a natural progression. It was like a step on the ladder to ACC or on the path to MCC. So I'm probably telling you a little bit about my internal experience and who I am as a person by describing that out loud.
Becoming a MCC, and part of the reason we're having this conversation today is celebratory for the Ad Astra Coach Alliance and for the three of us to celebrate your attainment of the MCC designation this past year. But it's no small feat. There's a lot of work that goes into it. Can you share some of the pivotal moments or decisions that really set you on this path?
Well, the first, I think, was we've already described is the moment where coaching became the path, and then starting coach training and starting to learn and starting to have those experiences, and then really attaining the ACC, feeling like, oh, this is possible. So all of those were pivotal moments in the early part of my career. And then I think there were a couple of other pivotal people along the path, and I think both of you might have been in the room for these. We had conversations with a lot of MCC coaches about what mastery is, about what it looks like to be a master coach. People like Jay Perry, who were in the room and really challenging us to really claim that definition of mastery and really move in that direction. So there were lots of really early informers, Pat Williams, just lots of folks that we had the opportunity to really interact with who really described what that path looks like. So all of those were pivotal moments. And then for me, I think the most pivotal moment was a decision that I made in, I think it was 2019, the year before the pandemic. when I chose to go to Toronto and study for a week with Marcia Reynolds and Dorothy Sminovich. And that was a mastery retreat. There were, I think, 8 or 10 of us together that spent the week together, really diving into mastery and what mastery looks like. And that week challenged me greatly in terms of moving to mastery. But there were so many lessons that I learned in that week about coaching, about the ways to shift from where I was coaching to the way I needed to coach to get an MCC. And the two of them really sort of transformed everything that I think about coaching, and they were both really pivotal in my development. And then, the pandemic was awful and horrible, and yet it gave me the opportunity to really dive into a lot of training. So I worked alongside Marcia Reynolds in breakthrough coaching. I did a lot of work in that program. I also took that program, did a lot of mentoring in that program, and that sort of continued that path of really moving into mastery. And so those were the most pivotal moments. And that was sort of toward the end when my hours were accumulating enough that I could start to really get serious about getting my application together.
Yeah, Marcia and Dorothy have affected us all, I believe, and in very positive ways, and are great teachers. And so that's a great legacy to think through, and a great lineage, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I also want
And
to
we
throw in
brought them
there.
in to work with us too. Sorry, Phyllis. We brought them back, both Dorothy and Marcia, to work with the Ad Astra team as well, and had just another really great experience and deep dive into what's possible with coaching.
And I was going to throw out one other shout out to Virginia Kellogg, was also instrumental in helping us all move toward that mastery level.
Absolutely. I can't believe I forgot Virginia. She's such a gem and was, yes, absolutely pivotal in our development.
Were there specific challenges you faced or breakthroughs that you experienced in this journey that shaped the way you coach today?
It's, I'm laughing because it's really back to that thing we talked about a little bit ago about releasing the need to fix. And I alluded to the fact that it took years to really, really, really let go of that. You sort of release it in small doses, and that's at least how it was for me. And as part of the credentialing process at every level, in the years that at least I was credentialing, some of that's changed along the path. I've seen lots of changes in the credentialing process along the years. But in the years that I was doing the credentialing process, I had to do a recording that was assessed independently for ACC. I had to do 2 recordings for PCC and then another 2 for MCC. And it was really in my PCC preparation when I joke many times that me and the competencies were in the ring together. We were doing a lot of duking it out in the ring. I There's a set of core competencies that the International Coaching Federation describes that are research based, that are created by very smart people about how transformation happens in human beings. And I fought them for a long time. In that sort of PCC journey, which is where you really start to learn to break free of all of these sort of needs to fix and do all of these other things that we typically do, consult, not trust ourselves, not trust our clients as much. There's a sort of breaking down of all of that that has to happen over time. And it was during that PCC preparation, when I was trying to get my recordings and put my application together, I was doing mentoring with a coach whose name was Stephen Falante, and he just broke me down in all of those conversations of mentoring. And he'd be like, okay, Teresa, you are consulting. And I would be like, I'm not consulting. And he's like, yes, you are. And we'd go through the competencies and we'd go through my transcriptions and he'd say, do you see this marker right here? Like, do you see this moment where you said XYZ? You are consulting. And I'd be like, oh. And then we made so much progress. And I remember getting a recording one day where I did it. Like I fully was present. I fully trusted my client. I fully let go of all of those needs. And it was beautiful. Like it was just this moment where I finally was like, okay, now I feel this. Like I feel and embody the power of what that's like. And yet I take that recording and he's like, this is fabulous. You're doing so amazing. And I was like, yes, I'm so excited. And then he's like, and at this moment, you still consulted. So there were still those moments where even when I could feel it, it would still creep in. And it was really that whole PCC process for me was a whole like breaking me down, breaking everything I thought I knew about coaching and helping people and doing this work and then rebuilding it back up again. And I in some ways think that's what PCC is like. That's what the intention of PCC is really when you're at that level. It's a full understanding and embodiment of the power of the competencies. But I had to fight them for a while before I could actually get there until I could feel it. And then when I felt it, there was just a massive shift in my coaching. And then it was right after that when I went to Toronto and met Marcia and Dorothy. So it was just like all kind of happening at the same time.
Tell us now if we kind of fast forward a little bit. So you got the PC and congratulations on that. When you got the MCC, because that's a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of more deep dives. I'm just curious, literally, how you felt when you got your letter.
So,
Or when you arrived.
yeah, to tell you that, I need to back up just a little bit. So it took me 14 years to get to the place that I could even submit my application because, you know, as Andy described in the intro, there's a number of hours of training, mentoring, but you have to have 2,500 hours of coaching, and a large majority of those have to be paid hours of coaching. And it takes a long time to accumulate that number of hours. So it took me, because I wasn't just doing coaching, I was doing training and facilitation, I was doing other things in my practice. It took me 14 years to get there. So this was literally a Mount Everest goal. This was discipline over a long time to be able to do that. So a year before I submitted my application, I always take some downtime at the end of the year to sort of look at my business and make some decisions about what I want to do for the next year. And I was looking at my number of hours and I realized I can pass 2,500 hours this year. So I knew that that was my goal. And I knew by the end of the year, I would be able to pass that number. So it was at that moment, I was like, okay, this is when I'm going to start really ramping up to get my application ready. So while it took me 14 years to get there, there was a year of very intense study, recording, assessing my own recordings, working with two mentor coaches who listened to my recordings, who gave me lots of feedback. There was a lot of work that went into that last year, sort of like that last sort of, climb to the top. So it was intense. And then and there is a process. So you submit your application and then you get, okay, this part of it's been approved. Now it's going to do this. So now these things are going to move forward. And then you get another drip where, okay, your recordings have been moved to an assessor. Okay, your assessments have been approved. That was the moment that I was like, okay, that moment when I got an email, and it's just some random day, you have no idea when it's going to happen, and it just shows up in your email that just says congratulations, your assessments have been approved and you can move on to the next step. So there are these moments where you're just sort of constantly checking email to see what the progress is. And it takes a long time. It was 18 weeks from the moment I submitted my application till I actually received the opportunity to take the exam. So it's all this time that's going. So it's sort of long and drawn out. So there are lots of moments along the way. So my assessments are approved. I can then finally sit for the exam. So I scheduled my exam for 3 weeks out so I could do a really like last minute, make sure I was really prepped to go into that exam. It's a 3 hour situational judgment exam, which in and of itself is an incredibly hard test. And that's the moment when you know. So I I took the exam in a testing center, and I walked out of there after this 3 hour exam, and I'm sitting in this tiny little room with this woman who checked me in. And she turns around to the printer and she grabs my test results off of the printer. You don't get your results on the computer screen, you only get them in writing. So she hands me this piece of paper, but she turned it over so I couldn't see it. So she slides this thing over to me, and I said, "Are those my test results?" And she said, "Yes, they are." And I said, "I'm not going to look at those right now." And she goes, "Okay." So my heart was beating out of my chest. And I said, I checked out of the exam. I grabbed all my stuff and I told myself, I'm going to walk upstairs and I'm going to sit in the chairs that are upstairs. And then I'm going to look at this piece of paper. So I walked out and I got about 4 steps and I couldn't stand it any longer. So I'm in this hallway. There's not another human being in sight. And I turned it over. And by the way, it doesn't say congratulations, you passed at the top. You have to like read down a little ways into this paper before you can actually see whether you passed or not. And I passed the exam and I literally started to cry. I was bawling, like just crying. And I found my way upstairs and sat down in this chair. I called my husband and he's like, "Oh my gosh, you didn't pass." And I said, "No, I passed. I passed." And he's like, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "I don't know. I have no idea why I'm crying." So I sat there crying while my poor husband was trying to talk me off a ledge and saying congratulations. But it was literally like standing at the top of Mount Everest and being able to see like, the sun coming. I mean, it was a really massive moment. And then I called another woman who I had been studying with because she was right at the end of her MCC journey. She was waiting to get her recordings approved. I was crying. She said, "Oh my gosh, you didn't pass." And I said, "I did pass." And she's like, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "I don't know." So I have the whole conversation all over again. But it was really, it was an amazing, it was a career highlight for sure.
Well, I remember that day and the excitement that you had, that we all had, because it's such a monumental thing. I'm curious. You had mentioned as you went through the PCC and how you changed and how your coaching changed. As you went through the MCC and obtained it, what does Teresa look like now with an MCC versus what she looked like with the PCC?
It's such a great question. And I actually spend a little bit of time thinking about that, especially in conversations with other folks. Lissa DeHart is another really great colleague, and we've had this conversation about how MCC changes you. And I will say along the way, is monumental, and you all did celebrate. And to say that you don't reach a goal like this alone, first of all, that those colleagues along the way who challenge you, those colleagues along the way who support you, who cheerlead you. Those are such great lessons in for anyone who is trying to reach a really big goal, that being able to surround yourself with positive people who have your back and that you can support and help along the way so that it becomes a mutual support system is incredibly, incredibly important. And the fact that you all sat alongside me and listened to me talk about and that whole journey has just really been a blessing. So I want to thank all of you. There's so many people to thank. And that was really the first post that I put out on social media when I talked about my MCC, was thanking a lot of people. And there are a lot of people to thank. And we've talked about many of them today. And so I just want to acknowledge the two of you for your support along the way too. The reality is because of the work that you put in over a long amount of time, I am a better coach today than I was, obviously, when I started training. I and and MCC, while it is amazing and wonderful and a tearful, joyful experience, it's it's just it's a badge, like it's a thing that demonstrates that you demonstrated a lot of work that you put in, and that you can demonstrate a strong alignment with the competencies. And it says to other people that you are committed to your growth and development. But it's really just, if I go back to that Everest metaphor, it's sort of like standing up there and at the top of the peak and going, oh, wait, there's a whole nother world out there that I couldn't see from any other vantage point. And so really it's just a stop on the path. And that's all that it is, really. I continue to grow as a coach. I continue to get better. I am by no means with an MCC a perfect coach. And I think I said to maybe it was to you two, but certainly to some colleagues the other day, that the thing that I love about coaching is that it's never perfect. Like the fact that it's not perfect is what makes it perfect. And whether it's perfect or not is never for me to judge anyway. It's really for the client to judge. Is it what the client needed? Was I the person that the client needed in the moment that we were having the conversation, at the moment in time that they needed it, that makes it perfect? And that's what I really, really love about coaching, is that it's not for me to decide. And if it's even if it's not perfect, it's still perfect. And that's, so who am I today? I'm still the same person. Like, I'm back to now, like, what's my next Everest goal? And how do I continue to go on this journey of mastery? And part of it's continuing to challenge myself, but part of it's now offering that opportunity to other coaches through mentoring and working with other coaches to challenge them to mastery by listening to other people's recording, by coaching out loud, by coaching in front of people, because getting feedback and reactions from other people about your coaching is scary. It is really scary to offer your coaching in front of your peers and colleagues and get feedback for that. So there are lots of things that I'm continuing to do to be a better coach, but part of that's partnering with other people to help them be better coaches, because I learn by mentoring other people, and I learn by continuing to challenge myself. So this is not Mount Everest and then pat yourself on the back and then go about your journey. It's like, oh, there's a whole nother world out there, and you just continue to get better.
So we do know you to be goal-oriented. Those goals have a way of driving you. If we play off the Mount Everest metaphor for a minute, you're standing on that peak and you're looking out at the rest of the world. And I love the way you describe that. Where is your gaze going now?
It's such a great question, Andy. the getting my MCC and standing at that peak happens at a really interesting moment in my life because it happens to correspond with being on the verge of also being an empty nester. So my life this last year and into the next year, really the theme is transition. There's a lot of stuff going on. And my last child is about to graduate from high school and go off to college. And so there are lots of big questions out there about where does your gaze go? So interestingly enough, it's been a blessing that my MCC came in the same year that he's still at home. So I can sort of go through these transitions sort of slowly. And my gaze has really gone to him, this last year of really
Mm.
just being able to have that goal met and then have a moment to just take a breath so that I can just really be with him. Listen to all of his hopes and dreams about what he wants for the future. He just got into an engineering program at the University of Kansas. He's working on a couple of other scholarships and applications that he's really excited about. He just finished his cross country year and he's getting ready to go into track season. He's such a great and lovely and amazing kid. And he loves talking to me. And he comes home from school every day and wants to sit in my office and talk to me about his day and what he's learned and what he's doing and what he wants to do with his future. And I am loving every minute of that. And so my gaze this year is really just settled on him and my other kids. My oldest son is about to graduate from college. So we're talking about what does his future look like? What kind of job does he want? He's sort of sorting out a couple of options and he's coming to me and he's saying, well, what do you think? Because I really appreciate your advice and your perspective. And so some of our conversations are coaching conversations esque, and some of them are just like advice giving because that's what he really
Mm.
needs and that's what he really wants. So it's just been this really beautiful year of really just, and then my middle son is pole vaulting down the road. And as he's learning and growing in his strengths as an athlete, there's just a lot of really interesting stuff going on. But my gaze has really just been about pausing this last year and really just being present as a parent in all of those moments of my son's lives. So that's been really, really exciting and lovely and amazing. And of course, building Ad Astra with the two of you has really been a challenging exercise this last year as we worked with a partner that's really challenged us to really build Ad Astra and get really clear about who we want to be and the kinds of things that we want to do as a business. So that's really been exhilarating. And then, you know, this pause has given me moments to think about, okay, what do I want to do after Lauren leaves the house? And I've got a couple of books in mind. So I've written a couple of book outlines. I've got a
Mm.
couple of people that I've started to talk to about the kind of book that I want to write and what that looks like. And so lots of things. It's funny. There was a moment where I was like, in a moment of transition like this, I really have time now to ramp up. And then there was a part of me that's like, do I want to ramp up? Maybe I want to ramp down. Maybe I want to go travel. And that lasted about 6 seconds. Like it was like, no, ramping down is not who I am. My husband will tell me, my husband would tell you she never sits. She never sits down for a moment. She will say, this weekend, we are just going to sit and we're going to just chill out. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to watch movies and that'll last like 4 seconds. And then I'm off to like, scrubbing the house from top to bottom or, whatever it is. Like I don't sit. I'm not a sitter. I'll never be a sitter. And so there will always be another goal. So that was a long answer to your question,
Yeah.
which is my gaze has really gone to my family this year, but big things sort of on the horizon that I'm thinking about.
Well, And it's great that you are at this time in your life and just seeing your face kind of shine when you talk about your family and where they are, and this whole 14-year journey from not only growing in your coaching skills, but growing your young family to now they're all starting to head on out on their own. I'm just curious now, this new Teresa, this current Teresa, how do you feel you are showing up? Two things to think about. How are you showing up differently for your professional clients, and or how do you feel they are experiencing you at this new uh, level of coaching experience, life experience? How are they experiencing you differently?
I think and I hope that they are experiencing somebody who is in true partnership with them. And I think and I hope that they're experiencing what feels like total trust in them. Being able to witness somebody in terms of what's really important to them, where they're trying to go, what's driving them, what's truly challenging for them, being able to acknowledge and witness those feelings and experiences that people are having as they're really truly trying to be the best leader that they can be. And what's interesting, and I'm sure you would all agree that your coaching clients, our coaching clients, care deeply about who they are when they show up to work. And they care deeply about making a difference. And tapping into that and reminding folks about what's truly important really reorients people to purpose. You know, we all get frustrated. We all find ourselves in situations that we don't understand the dynamic, that feels conflictual, that feels out of control, that feels like we have no idea what we're doing. But to really be witnessed in that experience of having those struggles, and then to say, and then to be able to, through a full partnership, be able to uncover hope that things can change by sorting through that situation and then coming up with things that they can try, and then making it okay to fail. You know, the ability to truly be who you are with another person and not have to put on what I describe as the Iron Man mask. You know, you don't have to be Tony Stark in conversations with a coach. You really just get to be who you are, right? You get to be, you get to remove all of that armor. You get to remove all of the masks. You get to just truly be vulnerable and say, I really don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what the next step is. You know, I don't know. And to be able to let that armor down in a partnership with someone is, it's such a privilege to be able to witness that and partner with people. But ultimately, I want two things for the people and that I coach, and I hope that they feel that number one, they can take their armor off and they can truly be who they are. And I always tell my clients, I never want coaching to feel like a task on your to-do list. It should always feel like a moment when you can come up for air. And you've probably all heard that expression, you know, where the duck sort of looks really calm on the surface, but below they're just really paddling away and like struggling. And that's what most of us are doing all the time, is we're just like paddling away, trying to look as calm as we can on the surface. But in coaching, you can show us the paddling. You can show us all of that and we can talk about it. What is the paddling that you're doing? And this is the moment where you can come up for air and you can grab your breath and you can really intentionally look at the situation and really walk away with an action or a couple of actions that you can try that will make you feel a little bit better and that you're making progress. And that's what I hope people feel with me and I think it's true partnership. I think that's what mastery is completely present in a true partnership that makes people feel seen, heard, valued, and somewhat more in control with intentional action when they walk away.
That's wonderful. The name of our podcast is Growth Beyond Boundaries. You've done such a nice job today talking about your growth in this process, the boundaries perhaps that you've faced. And as you look forward, what does that growth now mean to Teresa and look like? And I'm not talking about the what you do, I'm talking about who you are.
I it's that's a big question. I think to be who you truly are, and I think to be the best coach anyone can be, is you do have to be truly who you are because all of us are different and we're authentic and we all bring something different to the coaching partnership. And we all bring something different and unique to our lives and our work. And I think there's also this sense of being okay to be seen that is important. And there's a little bit of, sort of partnered alongside witnessing this in other people. There is this growth as for you also as a coach that you
Right.
can't deny. Like as we are learning to coach, just like I described in that sort of PCC journey, there is a lot of unravelings and sort of reorienting that happens as you become a coach, especially as people are listening to your coaching and giving you feedback. The process of being truly present and partnering with another person, it takes some vulnerability of your own. So there's a lot of work that coaches have to do alongside this whole journey of becoming a coach, especially one who is really leaning into being a masterful coach. And that can be sort of unnerving at times. And so I think I've done that several times. There have been several times where I've had to pause and I've had to do my own work. And I think at this moment in time, part of this whole transition journey is like, there is a certain level of, I don't know how to describe this other than because I have the letters MCC behind me, behind my name, it means something to other people. I don't necessarily feel it or own it, but I do think there is this sort of sense of, oh, wisdom or something that you have that people inherently sort of understand that you've been through to get there. So there's this weird sort of sense of wise old owl that comes along with this that I didn't necessarily expect or even I don't I don't know how to own. You know what I mean? Like I don't necessarily feel comfortable with it, but once you put it on, it's sort of like when you get promoted in an organization or you take on a role of a manager, a supervisor, a CEO. You take on some power and authority with that movement into those positions that you can't take off again. Like it's sort of there, and then you wear it wherever you go, even if you don't necessarily like how it feels. So there is this interesting, like people reaching out to you that didn't reach out to me before, people who are looking to me for other kinds of advice and things because of MCC that I didn't necessarily expect. So it's an interesting sort of like moment of wisdom that I didn't necessarily see coming. So this is the discomfort that I'm in right now. So to answer your question, it's like, how do I lean into that in a way that's still authentic and own it while also remaining humble and knowing that this is just a moment in time. So there's a lot of that. I don't know how definitive that feels as you're all hearing that, but I think other people experience this when
Sure.
you get a degree or you get a PhD or you become a CEO or you become something, you have this sort of now people expect something of you, and maybe your own expectations are not in alignment with what other people think of you. So you have to sort of wrestle with that. And I've had those conversations. You've probably had those conversations with people in coaching where they're like, I'm still the same person that I was. I'm growing and learning, but now people expect me to be something different because I'm a CEO or because I'm a president of an organization or because whatever, like there's this interesting shifting that I think occurs that takes a whole new sort of understanding.
Sure. Probably at the end of our time, are there any words of wisdom um, based on that past theme, right? Words of wisdom or thoughts that you'd like to convey to our listeners?
So I'm going to turn the tables on the two of you, actually, from the vantage point of hearing me talk about this journey and thinking about your own coaching. My question back to you would be the same thing. What words of wisdom do you have for folks who are listening?
Well, first of all, that was a great turn of she's very coach like when she does that. Phyllis, you want to start or would you like me to?
Um, I would say, in all transparency, Teresa was the second coach that I had outside of my coach training. Teresa was my second coach, and quite frankly, she is still a mentor coach for me. And one of the things that I would give it, and that I've seen in Teresa, or and can take away from her as a coach, is that whole building of trust, and how when you start to let go the advice giving and the consulting, it's a matter of, okay, that means I have to trust myself or the process, or um and I think Teresa does a great job of that. So I know she was asking us our wisdom, but what I take away from Teresa is learning to trust the process, truly learning to trust the process. And I think that's the growth part, for a coach as they grow. I think learning to trust the coaching process, and like you said, fighting that, but learning to trust it over time. And I feel like that's where we start to experience our own growth as coaches.
Yeah. There are a few things that come to mind. I think I'll just focus on one because then I could talk for a long time after that. One of them, Teresa and Phyllis, is this relationship with the client. In so many different ways when you talked about your growth as a coach and your struggle as you've reformed yourself for the PCC and your growth from that point to where you are right now with the MCC, that relationship with the client seems to kind of come forward even stronger. It's the strength of that partnership, the trusting of each other in that partnership, uh, the role that the coach plays. We don't just sit there and be a sounding wall for a client. We're more than that because through our listening and through our caring, we help them shift. We help them grow. We help them move in the direction that they want to go. And that comes out to me more and more and more when I hear you talk and see you coach and see your eyes light up, that spark. And the reason why you coach is because of those clients and their growth. And I think your discussion here today just highlights that so much.
And if I were just like putting a punctuation mark on this, on what does this mean for our clients and what it means to work with a coach, is that a coach is really invested in what you want. They're going to tap into what you care about, what's important to you, understand how you want to move the world or impact the world, and be your partner in helping you accomplish that. So your agenda, your desires, what you want to do is the center point. And if you truly want to get better, it's really, really hard to do that on your own. In fact, I'm going to say it's impossible. I couldn't get to MCC on my own. I had to have mentors, people along the way, supports, colleagues, my family, people who supported me. Nothing can be done alone. And there's what my clients have demonstrated to me is that when you're willing to ask for help, when you're willing to sit and do the hard work, and by the way, coaching isn't always easy. It's a great partnership and it's supportive and it should feel like a really good use of your time. And coaches are going to ask you some pretty hard questions. There's going to be some wrestling going on within that when that coaching relationship and a coaching engagement. This is where the growth beyond boundaries comes in. When you're working with a coach, our hope and expectation for you is that you're going to grow beyond whatever boundaries exist for you. And I think that's the benefit that we offer to our clients. And that seems like a really good sort of punctuation mark to put on the end of this conversation.
Perfect. Thank you, Teresa, for your time, your thoughts, your wisdom. Thank you, Phyllis, for joining us in this discussion. And we'll see you next time. And that wraps up our very first episode of Growth Beyond Boundaries. A heartfelt thank you to Teresa Schwab for sharing her inspiring journey to achieving the MCC credential. Her story is a powerful testament to the dedication, mastery, and passion it takes to reach the pinnacle of coaching excellence. Also, thank you to my colleague Phyllis Collins for joining us on this episode. If you found today's conversation valuable, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with friends and colleagues who are passionate about growth and coaching. Remember, this is just the beginning. We have so many more inspiring stories, strategies, and insights coming your way. Until next time, keep challenging the limits and unlocking your potential. Together, let's grow beyond boundaries.